You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. And this morning we have a special guest with us, friend of the podcast, and just friend in life and metho-nerd-isms, and just all around wonderful human being. We have Dr. Ashley Boggan on with us this morning. Ashley, thanks for being on.
Thank y'all for inviting me back.
Oh,
Glad
always.
I didn't steer you away last time.
No, so much fun when you're on the podcast. Would you remind our listeners a little bit about yourself? You know, the basics: who you are, where you're from, what you do.
So I am Dr. Ashley Boggan. I serve as the General Secretary of the General Commission on Archives and History, which is, one of those Methodist ways of saying that I'm just a big old metho nerd. I live in New Jersey. Laywoman with the Greater New Jersey Annual Conference. That's about it.
Yeah, that's about it. That, no big deal, right? I love that. You have just really brought into popularity and coined the phrase "metho nerd" over the last couple of years, and we love it. I love that popping up on Facebook on shirts and cups and people just digging into our history and making it fun again. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's I can't take credit for coining the term. I don't remember where I first heard it, but this latest kind of iteration of it, credit should go to Bishop Karen Oliveto, because she and I were in conversation before an annual conference, or before a general conference, about metho-nerd, and if there was an official definition. And so we came up with the definition that's on the coffee mugs and all that stuff together.
Love it. We're always happy to give Bishop Karen credit, but you're on the podcast, so we're going to throw it your way. I love it. Well, you have a new book coming out. Would you tell us about it a little bit?
Yeah. So it comes out April 1st, and is called Wesleyan Vitality, Reclaiming the Heart of Methodist Identity. I have been at the Mountain Sky Annual Conference and at other annual conferences doing kind of the vile, quote unquote, talk. I love that, my reputation within certain annual conferences is now that vile woman. But this is kind of a bringing together of those talks. At each annual conference, they're slightly different. And so this is kind of bringing together, providing some more context to kind of English and Methodist history of where John Wesley's submission to be more vile came from. And it also provides kind of some context as to where kind of my obsession with this phrase came from too. And then it kind of continues the story. So in a lot of the talks that I've done at annual conferences or clergy retreats or wherever, right, we kind of end it with Wesley. And so this looks at, what happened to that quote unquote vile spirit of Methodism. How did it kind of take a seat on the back burner, if you will, as the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Methodist Church and the United Methodist Church became big old institutions. And it looks at kind of the few people within the Methodist traditions who carried on and sustained that sense of vileness, that sense of vitality, kind of reminding us of who we are and trying to do the work of calling us back.
I did the Radical Methodism. I turned it into a sermon series and did it with my church at the beginning of the year this year. And it's been one of my favorite series I've done because I preached differently. I preached a little more of an academic sermon, which I don't do, but there's so much there in digging into our history and pulling out Wesley's commitment to be more vile, right? Just that it was so much fun to dig into that history and where the Methodist movement started with him and Charles and those guys of doing classes and bands and then almost him getting stuck a little bit in the oh, this is what we have to be. How could we do this outside of the church, right? And then yeah, having that moment of, oh no, I'm going to submit to be more vile. This is what it's all about. And it rhymes so much with with what I see in the church today. Myself and my church included, right? Like we get stuck in our walls sometimes. And the encouragement to get my people to submit to me more vile was fun.
That's awesome.
Because they looked at me, they're like, what are you saying? I don't.
I mean, that's the thing, right? It's catchy. People
Mhm.
are like, did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
Like, yes, you did.
Yeah, you did. I said vile, and they're like, let's
And
talk
it's not
about
your
that.
words; it's Wesley's words.
That's
So
right.
you won't get in trouble for it, right?
That's right. I'd be like, he said it, not me.
I
We're
know.
just
I'm
trying to
just
live into it.
recording. Messenger. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, I've heard both Matt and I were at annual conference when you were here in Mountain Sky, and then you got to spend some time here in Bozeman, and it's fascinating. One, you do a phenomenal job unpacking Wesley, and even my wife who went to a Methodist university and studied theology there. Now 25 years later, it's like I'm not Methodist history is okay. You made it interesting for her.
I will take
Right.
it.
And for so many people who we dig into this all the time, or we've taken the classes, or we've spent some time with it, but I am impressed and re-energized with the hope that you bring with it and the excitement that you bring to history, especially our history. And it's such an important thing for us to dig back into. That was kind of the radical Methodism reminded me of how important it is. We don't teach our history as Methodist very well, and I don't know why. I don't know if we assume everybody knows it because it's Methodist history, or we just don't want to talk about it, or what. And I guess my question is, what are you finding in that realm of it's what you do, right? You're our teacher of Methodist history, and clearly it's very important. But what are you finding as you're writing these books and being at annual conferences and doing all the things?
I mean, I think it's exactly what you're kind of getting at, Zach. People don't know the history. Even people who are currently enrolled in seminary or recent graduates, or even some bishops, they don't know the history because either it's a class that they were, asked to take as part of their Senate requirements, their ordination requirements, and usually it's lumped together with either mission or polity or doctrine, and everything's smushed. And I love our United Methodist seminaries, both official and approved, but it's not always taught in an exciting way. So I think there's this big fear that because it's history, because it's denominational history, it's going to be really boring.
Mm-hmm.
But and I had that fear. I think I get into it a little bit in the book of, both my parents were ordained clergy, and I remember being a sophomore in high school, going with my parents to England for the first time to visit my sister. And my dad had this grand kind of following in Wesley's footsteps tour around London and other parts of England. And I was just like, why do I care if this old dead white guy from 250 years ago preached by this tree? Mm-hmm. And, I've been completely converted, right? My heart's been strangely warmed to the coolness of history, because I think when you really dig into not only Wesley, but a lot of kind of the vile people of Methodism, their journeys, the reasons that they did what they did, do speak to us so much today. They too were asking questions of like, why is the church shrinking? Why is the church becoming more or becoming less relevant to society? What is my faith calling me to do? in a social atmosphere, in a political atmosphere that has such inequity. And they found all those answers to their various questions within their Methodist identity of people aren't coming into your church. Well, maybe take your church to the people, right? Don't sit around and gripe about people not filling your pews on Sunday morning. Take it out.
Mhm.
And our call to doing systemic change and seeking systemic change in order to increase equity within this world. I think that is another one of those spaces and places where there are so many examples from our history as to how we've done that and why we've done that and how it makes us unique as Methodists to do so, that speak to what's going on today and that can call us back to the roots of our faith and even help us grow in our faith. And I think another thing that, as I've done some of these talks, people are really hungry right now for this history. The last couple of years, last 50 years, but also specifically last 5 years, because of COVID and affiliation, church has been kind of in a flux. Can we go into the sanctuary? Can we not? How do we do online worship? What decisions is my church going to make about our congregational identity? That I think this kind of infusion of here's what it means to be United Methodist has been received really well. And people were longing for it and are still longing for it. And, as the United Methodist Church, I think it's about damn time that we do some of this work.
Right.
That we really think about who are we, whose are we, and what is our mission and our vision in this world, not only now, but moving forward.
Well, and it's funny that, we've been having this conversation about history, and I had an amazing history experience at my seminary.
Yeah.
Dr. Ellen Blue would not let us not have good history experience. She forced it upon us.
Yes.
And so I became really, I fell in love with Christian history. And I always joked that even though I went to a United Methodist undergrad program and have a degree in religion, I didn't know what it meant to be Methodist until I went to seminary and had Dr. Blue and the work that she did with us in history. And that's, I have always have been in love with our United Methodist heritage. And I've also found that even talking about Christian history is so, even if you even talk about the history, from Jesus to Reformation, nobody wants to talk about that. And to me, that's so foundational of why we do a lot of the things we do in worship. I mean, let's talk about that. Hey, this thing, being able to carry a Bible around, is more of a recent thing in our history than our history itself. And I have loved how you have kind of put to the forefront our Wesleyan heritage and why that's important. And I think it speaks well to this idea of fracturing that we've had within our denomination, and how this is we've had this before. This hasn't been something, this isn't new to us. And what can we learn from our past separations, and how can that propel us into the future? Because, from what I remember and understand, is that we were actually better kind of after separation, depending on which side of the fence you went on. But I'm thinking of the MEC more than I am the MEC South. But I think there's some value in what you're doing to help us understand that, because I really believe that not only just our clergy and our bishops and our district superintendents, our lay people need to have access and have a space where this is done, and not such a boring academic way that I could hand them one of those books and they just be lost because it's so academic. But to have a space, to use the submitting to be more vile stuff and some of the other things that you have done. What have you found? What have you felt like the response has been since you've kind of rolled all this out?
Ooh. So I do want to clarify. Well, I want to kind of backtrack for a second and say, I have the utmost respect for all of my colleagues who teach Methodist
Yes.
history. I think the deeper problem is we're trying to squeeze Methodist history and theology or Methodist history and doctrine into 12 weeks. And that's just not enough time to unpack it. I also, one of the things that has come up lately, not only in kind of giving these talks, but within kind of the scholarly realm of Methodist history is how Western and white we teach our history. And so this gets us into another question of if it's already hard at a seminary level to dig into all of Methodist history, kind of within the John Wesley and Francis Asbury bubbles, within 12 weeks, then how in the heck do we actually teach Methodisms that emerge around the world that either claim root to John Wesley or Asbury or someone else, and look at the differences and the uniqueness of how Methodism flourishes in different contexts. And so my kind of I guess hope is that maybe Methodist history will become like a 6-part course that you take all of your seminary education. That'll never happen.
Well, we had it. So
we
you
can
had to
hope.
do at Phillips when I was there. Now, granted, probably things have changed because that's just how things work. But you took Methodist, you took evangelism, then you took doctrine, then you took polity, then you took history, and you had to take those were separate courses. And
Mhm.
that's the one thing I love because I was listening to other people who went to other seminaries, and they're like, "Oh, we do all that in one class." I'm like, "Ooh, you can't do that. Like that's." And so my statement of me becoming more Methodist at a Disciples of Christ seminary is a legitimate statement because literally we had those classes. I mean, it was segregated out in a way that allowed us to dive deeper, buy all the books and all the things. But I think that's the one of the things that I definitely appreciated about my experience was in that is just having that separated out, and I think it's key.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you and that's all it was like we require Old Testament and New Testament to graduate, but you don't have to take you don't just do a survey of the Bible course and call it good.
Right.
Like so
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's been one of the best responses that I've gotten is the sheer amount of questions people have. Right. That not only shows that people are listening, but they're actually like thinking,
Mhm.
thinking with me or thinking beyond or tangential
Mhm.
or whatever. And one of my favorite answers to give is always, I don't know. Like I don't know. I will never pretend to know all of Methodist history. I love kind of hearing where people's minds go and then trying to get answers with them or to them. Right. Because that shows it not only increases my knowledge, but it increases the knowledge of all of us and kind of puts us in conversation with one another.
You talk about our shared history, and I didn't grow up United Methodist. I came to it later in life, and so I got to do the intentional digging into our history because I didn't know until I was an adult, and and that I don't know that was beneficial for me, but it wasn't until 2016 whenever the World Methodist Conference was in Houston, whenever that was. I didn't know it existed until I applied for it and was like, hey, this sounds fun, and got to go and really see our Wesleyan connection on a global level. Like I knew we were United Methodist on a global level, but to see our Wesleyan history, and you talk about there's so much more connection than John or Francis. This spreads in different contexts in our Wesleyan theology in so many different ways with so many different people that we haven't heard the stories of. And that's fascinating to me. And we see that through events and gatherings like the World Methodist Conference. And that was so exciting for me and opened up a whole new world that I've only scratched the surface of how did we get there, right? How did we spread in such a way? intentionally come back together to share that history, to share that community with one another, I think is pretty dang cool. But also shows us how connectional we are, right? In just across beyond the United Methodist world.
And I think so I'm going to take a second and plug our Archives in History podcast, Untied Methodism. So we are, I think, starting in June. I'm pretty sure it's June. We're going to start speaking with different Methodist historians around the world and talk about, like, how did Methodism come to the Philippines? How did it come to Kenya? How did it come to Germany? We may even have like Canada in there. I don't remember, but we're doing that for, I think, 8 months. I think we have eight different.
Yeah.
And that's really right. This is a place and a space where I don't have a lot of knowledge. So I'm really kind of doing this as a scholarly inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to see and try to figure out is, what is the common aspect of our identity? You know, I like to hope that maybe it's this Wesleyan vitality, but I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a lot there, right? And yeah, how are we connected? Why are we connected? Why do we share these roots? I'm fascinated by that. I will tune in every episode. Because I think it's important work. You know, we talk a lot about being connectional and being who we are as Wesleyans and as Methodists, but I don't think we really know what that means on a local level, on a regional level, or even on a global level. And just reading through your introduction of the book, to bring it sort of kind of back to that, you introduce that a good bit, and how we have possibly not lost our way, but being stuck in the sense of, here we are, in reclaiming that vitality and getting back out there and bringing the church to people, right, rather than expecting them to come to us. And so, what do you, thinking about that and kind of what you're journeying through in the book, what do you think the biggest challenges that we're facing as churches for striving for that vitality today?
Ooh. I think, well, I'll say it this way. I think the desire to submit to be more vile is there. I think people often ask, and this is a question I get a lot too, is, okay, I want to do this, right? I want to submit to be more vile. Now what do I do?
How? What do I do? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And there's no, like, you know, prepackaged guide that accompanies this book on, like, okay, so you want to submit to be more vile. Here's step one. That's not, you know, and I think that's not what Wesley did either. It's really kind of what's at the heart of embodying vitality is getting to know the needs of your local community and responding with and to them, right? And doing so in a way that you're not necessarily concerned about if it'll have kind of throwback on your church. You're not too concerned if, you know, you're going to get your hands dirty, or if you have to talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, or if it might be seen as doing something quote unquote political, right? Those types of things are where I think that's where we need to be able to start and be comfortable doing that. And it can be hard. So I live in Madison, New Jersey. I've tried to get my own local church and churches around me to begin a Be More Vile Day on April 2nd, right? Where we go out and we do mission radically. We center the outcast, hand microphones to the silenced, those types of things. And I'm one of those people who tends to have really big ideas and then want someone else to take them and run with them. But I've tried to take this and run with it. And the thing that I've come up with is, or the thing that I've come up against is, within a 2-month time span to plan this Be More Vile Day, people are like, well, we don't have enough time to plan some sort of mission like that. And so I think that's where it can be so frustrating, is the energy is there, the desire's there. The implementation can be so hard. because either people are nervous or they don't want to take on the leadership, or we're all just freaking busy.
Mhm.
You know, I travel a lot for work. I have two little kids. I'm a single mom. I have a dog. Like all of these things pull us in different directions to where, yes, I would love to go spend, a few hours every week or every day or whatever, getting to know my neighbors and responding to their need. How do I do that when there's only 24 hours in the day?
Right. Yeah, I feel that deeply just as a pastor, right? In a fairly active church doing some of that work of I can't be all the places and have a family and have, and do all the things. And I feel bad, right? I still feel, even starting my fourth year, I still feel guilt when I can't show up for something where my people aren't asking me to show up, right?
Yeah.
They're like, we got this. You do what you need to do. But I'm like, I want to be there. I want to be there with you guys. And then there are times I just can't. We had a protest here in Bozeman a couple of weeks ago that I really wanted to be at. I had some folks there from the church, and I wanted to be there just as a clergy person. And I just couldn't. I was just tired, emotionally, spiritually, physically, just drained. And I had to say, not today. As much as I want to be there, I just don't think I can do it today. And it was heartbreaking. I hate that because I wanted to, but I had to make that choice. Just I'm tired. It's been a couple of weeks, if not more, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I hear that deeply in folks of, well, we want to do this and we know how, but damn, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it just keeps being a lot.
And one of the things I have to remind myself, and I'm doing that currently as
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to do or live into vitality in a bougie white, predominantly white town like Madison, New Jersey. There are a lot of, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There are a lot of nonprofits out there that could use a partner or could use a platform, right? Where you can partner with them and uplift what they're doing and support it from underneath, right? We don't have to completely create a very unique, quote unquote, vile ministry that addresses all of the things all at once, right? Looking to what organizations are doing this work in and around your community and how can you support them.
That's definitely something I've been pushing here is that, hey, we don't have to do it. Like there's other people that are doing these things. Like let's just go join them or go join them. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to, we don't have to, like you don't have to go, you don't have to go in the church van, you don't have to wear your church t-shirt, just go be you.
Yeah.
And that's so countercultural to what the church is because you kind of hinted at that it's not about necessarily the numbers, it's about the lives being changed. And I think sometimes because our reporting requires us to have these things, like to show that we're doing these things, like we have law, and I have screamed this to the mountaintop. So this is nothing really new that anybody's ever heard me say. We have lost the identity of narrative and being able to share how people are living out their faith
Yeah.
versus, hey, we had 150 worship on Sunday. That's great. How are lives being changed through what you're offering in your worship experience?
Yeah.
We've been wrestling. We have slowly shifted to more narrative reporting. So we have this thing tonight, this meeting tonight. We call it our home team. It's our hospitality, outreach, missions, and everything else. Because we decided that that was a great space to have this. And one of the things that we crafted in that was that if you did something from one meeting to the next, there's a narrative. I created this narrative report that they have to fill out and it gives us a glimpse of how things are actually working and not just, hey, we made 12 blankets last month for, you know.
Mhm.
And to me that's part of the history. Like nobody's going to get excited about going to the archives and looking for the statistics of XYZ church for Sunday school in 1960. But if you had a story of, how Methodism came to the Cherokee Nation, like that's a better read.
Mhm.
So I definitely think that that's more. I really, really believe our narrative is more important than numerical. Not that numbers are not important, but we have lost the narrative that we are called to share.
Exactly. And I mean, John Wesley wrote nonstop. And without his journal and his tracts and treatises and all of those things, we wouldn't have the narrative of what he was doing and why. Right? Exactly like you said, right? If it's just him reporting class numbers and numbers of conversions and number of baptisms, that would not be an interesting history. I mean, I still might geek out a little bit on it, but not as much as the story. It's like, why were 40 people converted here and one converted here? Why? What was the difference there? What was going on in that town? What was happening? Or I often kind of rip on church vitality and kind of the idea that a church is only vital if it has X, Y, if it meets certain quotas.
Yeah.
Because I've seen very large congregations, over 500 in attendance each Sunday, who don't do a lot to change their community. And I've seen churches that have 10 people on each Sunday who are everywhere in the community.
Yep.
And according to our reporting statistics, we're going to name one as being more vital. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what they're actually doing, it would be it would be another one. So how do we kind of flip that narrative? And how do we do that in a way that is rooted in who we are? Because John Wesley was not concerned with how many people were sitting on a morning bench or a pew. He was concerned, like, are you leaving here a different person? And now that I've, converted you, let me put you into this intentional community, like a band or a class, where you can continue to grow in your faith. You can do mission work alongside other people, and you'll be sustained in that faith and that community in order to not only have your life changed, but the lives of others around you, those who you come into community with, their lives might be changed too. Like John Wesley, right? Preaching houses were not open on Sunday morning. So Sunday morning church attendance was not something he had paid attention to. John Wesley was concerned about, what are you doing from Sunday afternoon to Saturday night? And how are you taking God's love out into the world to transform it? And that's something you can't quantify.
I love that. In digging into the narrative of what is it? Who are we? How are our hearts and lives changed? And how are we taking that out into the world? Mm-hmm. Having been a person who served a church of 10 people or 15 people, having conversations with colleagues who serve much larger churches and much larger communities, and especially leading into COVID, that idea of, oh, well, we're the bigger church, we can send you our content, and then you folks out there will have something worthwhile. And having that conversation of, hey, I may have 15 people in church, but we only have 150 people in our community. Are you worshiping 10% of your community? Right? Like, tell me how we're not vital and how we're not making a difference. It's not about numbers, right? It's about who's showing up and what you're sending them out to. And it's huge, right? Like, that whole idea that bigger is somehow better is so silly in our context of church. It's about telling the story. And I mean, you were in Montana. I know you heard about Brother Van because I made sure.
and the song, right?
Yes, 100%. If you don't sing it in your sleep, I'm going to be very disappointed. But the reason why Brother Van's so fascinating to me is we still tell a story. People are still alive today who he was their parents' and grandparents' pastor, right? And so they still share those narratives of him riding into town, staying and having dinner at their parents' house. Just, it's fascinating to me. But only because we're telling the story. And we touch on how many churches and schools and hospitals he started across Montana, but that's not the important thing. He showed up. right? And when he showed up, something happened. And when he left, something continued to happen because people were changed, right? And he sent them back out. It's such a rhythm and rhyme of what John Wesley did in a way that continues that our tradition. And I mean, I've served in a lot of conferences across the country, and I've heard of circuit riders, and I've always heard of somebody's granddad was a circuit rider, but we never told their story,
Yeah.
right? And that's what fascinates me about Brother Van in Montana Methodism in such a way, because that history's still there. We're still holding on to it in a way that tells the story, that leans into what and why it was so important across this part of the world.
Yeah, and I hope to, or I like to hope, I'll say it that way, that each annual conference has their own Brother Van.
Yeah.
It's a matter of intentionally identifying and telling and retelling and retelling. That is so key. And I could sense in Mountain Sky and being in Montana with y'all that there was a deeper connection already to the history and heritage because of that pride in the story of Brother Van. And so, yeah, how do we recreate that across the different annual conferences? I would love to try to do that, right? Find the unique, cool, quirky stories.
Mm-hmm. I would say, I mean, they're there, right? Like we just have to pull them out, because we did, John Wesley didn't come over and fail and send Francis and Thomas over, and then we're here, right? Like there's a lot of history in between there. Why not dig back into that and find those cool stories and find and name the stories where we caused harm, and how do we heal from that and move forward? And that's something you did so well, and I see it just in the chapter titles of your new book, naming the places where we have caused harm. And need to continue to do work to heal that and offer up grace and forgiveness for it. That's a part of our history too, right? We're not perfect. We've made some mistakes, and we need to own that, right? And we need to own that in today's history also. I think you talk about being vile. I think that's an important work of being vile, of naming, hey, we've caused harm, but here's how we're moving to do good with that. Where do you, I don't know, I'll talk to you all day. So where do you find hope as you've kind of unpacked this book and poured into it? Where are you finding hope for us as a church, as a people, moving into the future?
I do think that we're at this really interesting kind of precipice within, the trajectory of Methodist tradition and Methodist history, where we do have a moment to figure out who we are. And I think, having not lived, through past disaffiliations and past separations and stuff, I don't know if the conversation happened, in 1939 or in 1844 after splits or after mergers of, okay, who are we? I don't know if that happened. It doesn't appear that it happened, but again, none of us were really there. But I feel an energy right now around having that conversation. And it's coming from various levels of the church. I hear it at local churches when I go and give talks. I hear it at annual conferences, jurisdictions, and from a lot of bishops. I get a lot of emails from bishops asking what resources would I recommend in Wesleyan and Methodist identity. How, I'm serving on different committees looking at planning for the 2026 leadership gathering and kind of 2028 general conference as to what do we need to do to continue to reshape the United Methodist Church moving forward. And I love that finally we are asking the questions about moving forward with an informed sense of self and a critically informed sense of self, of how do we use our history become aware of our history, hold ourselves accountable, and celebrate the good we've done, and take that with us. So I think that that's really what brings me so much hope. And I like to think that will continue, because I've seen it come up in so many different conversations, that will continue through 2026 and 2028. And, we'll see what happens. But
Right. Yeah, I do. I'm with you. I'm hearing more conversations about who are we? And we can really dig into and answer that without just through the split and where we've come from and where we're going. We have to have that conversation, right? And if we don't, it's not going to end well. We're just going to stay stuck, right? We're just going to stay right where we are and wonder why nobody is filling our pews.
on a couple hours on Sunday morning.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I find great hope in those conversations because like you, I'm hearing it in a lot of different arenas and venues and whatnot, which is pretty cool. And with a sense of renewed hope around it, and some excitement. So I hear that too. That's super hopeful.
So if we were looking for where to buy this book, where's the best place for us to find it?
I will always recommend Cokesbury first. So it will be out on April 1st. So check Cokesbury if you can. I think it is kind of available in a downloadable PDF as well as a paperback copy. If you could always ask your local bookstore to maybe order it. I'm sure they have means and ways to do that. For Lent, I gave up Amazon and Target and live TV and like all of these other things. And so that has been my Lenten practice. So, but if you need to order it through Amazon, you can also do that. But yeah, so, check it out. At the end of each chapter are discussion questions. So this can be an individually read thing. It can be a small group thing. And I am always happy and willing and actually kind of love Zooming in and talking with Sunday schools or congregations that are reading this work or other works and have questions. So please feel free to reach out. I love being in conversation with folks at all levels of the church. So
we appreciate that and appreciate just your time and energy and passion putting into our history and, teaching in a way that people can learn and dig into it and be excited about it again. It's really cool. You're doing great work and we appreciate you. You and your team and everybody that's involved, right? We know it's you're not carrying the burden for the whole denomination. There's lots of folks involved.
Well, thank you so much. And thank y'all for everything that y'all do with this podcast. I'm a fan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll find you another one to listen to. That's much better.
Yeah, we have some recommendations. So Ashley, definitely thank you for being on today. And we want to encourage our listeners to go to Cokesbury and buy it through Cokesbury, or, she gave a couple other places, but definitely a big fan of Cokesbury and what they do for us in the denomination. We're grateful for them. We'll have some information on how to connect into the archives and history and all the good things that they're doing listed in our show notes, but we're grateful for Ashley and her work. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.